Good morning, USA. Welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show, where I'm unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and mostly unscripted. Today is another day where I'll be somewhat scripted. I was having an interesting conversation with my son Isaac yesterday, and he saw this picture on my Hunter S. Thompson picture on my Facebook. There's a terrible danger in voting for the lesser of two evils because the parties can set it up that way. So the parties can set it up so that you're trapped into voting for a corporatist, whether the corporatist is called a Democrat or a Republican. So Isaac was wondering, what do we do? How do we get out of that trap? And so we had a good conversation, which I'll share with you. One of the elements, one of the ingredients in the recipe is the fact that roughly 20% of Sanders voters would rather vote for Trump, directly for Trump, if Warren, Harris, or Buttigieg win. And that's a big problem in swing states for any descendant of Hillary Clinton, because in those ravaged states, ravaged by NAFTA, we've talked about that, they're not going to vote for a corporatist. And so they'd rather vote directly for Trump, and that pretty much means the battleground states are lost to anybody who at least is perceived to be a corporatist. So we've got that. Isaac understands that. He's an enlightened suburbanite. And then we've got the centrists that he calls Republicans. Actually, he says centrists are really just Republicans. And so the centrists and their leaders are in fighting array. They're lined up against the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. And so there's a great Common Dreams article about that I'll link to down below. And here's a quote from that. But the larger tragedy unfolding before us is that the confederacy of dunces who allowed Trump to win in 2016 still controls the media and the party, and they are once again pursuing the same corporate-friendly policies and the same anti-progressive crusade that gave the nomination to a centrist neoliberal who was destined to lose, and there's no reason to expect a different outcome if they're successful again. That pretty much sums up Isaac's argument, that everything's in place against Bernie, so what are we going to do about that? It's a tough question. Here's a Medium article about the feeding frenzy of the centrist, the corporate-owned media. So we've got Kate Johnstone, who is the absolute champion, the absolute defender of justice when the corporate media start to pile on. She says, war is the glue that holds the empire together. A politician can get away with opposing some aspects of the status quo, that's Elizabeth Warren, when it comes to healthcare or education, but war as a strategy for maintaining global dominance is strictly off limits. This is how you tell the difference between someone who actually wants to change things and someone who's just going through the motions for show. The real rebels forcefully oppose the actual pillars of empire by calling for an end to military bloodshed, while the performers just stick to the safe subjects. This is another problem that Isaac identified. He said, well, Elizabeth Warren is saying the right things, policy-wise, so a lot of Bernie supporters, potential Bernie supporters, will be tricked by her and go to her. But this is the real dividing line, is the military-industrial complex. If you hear people saying what Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie are saying about the CIA and about the military, then you know they're for real. This is an article by Sean King that shows how Bernie is for real. He says, I reject the idea that who Bernie Sanders was in the 1960s is irrelevant. this picture kills me because I think of my son, Ethan. Ethan is about the age now, he's 19, that Bernie was in this picture. And I can picture Ethan taking a cause like this. He's very earnest and very, he would champion the underdog. He would stand up for what is right. And I can picture him doing these things. And then later in the article, we get a lot of really good history in this article. I hope you'll read it. I'll link to it in the information section. He goes on to say what was actually happening and how risky it actually was. And you've probably read this. Bernie side by side with black women, chained to them, refused to move. He did much more than this. I could tell you a dozen more stories, but I wanted to tell you who Bernie was when it counted, before we knew him, before he ever ran for office, before he was ever a national figure. He was a fighter. He has always rejected the status quo. He spoke out against apartheid in South Africa before it was popular. Today he speaks out against the apartheid-like conditions in Palestine, even though it's not popular to do so. And above here in this same article, he talks about telling stories like this. He's got this whole article is full of stories. And in here, it says that his family, Bernie's family, has come up to Sean with tears in their eyes, saying, we haven't even heard a lot of these stories. And Bernie doesn't talk about them. He doesn't use this as political capital. He's not using it as sound bites or as just words like the other, quote, progressive candidates are wont to do. He is the real thing. So then we come to the answer to Isaac's question, how to heal the Great Divide. I call him enlightened suburbanite. He says, so back to my original question. What do you do? How are you going to get people to vote for Bernie in the primary? People tend to react negatively to coercion from the Bernie or bust crowd. He's right. Warren is going to take a lot of voters based on her stated policy, and centrists are stupidly going to vote for someone else because they are actually Republicans. My thought is that the case eventually has to be made that Warren isn't going to achieve most of the things she says she's going to achieve. She doesn't plan to actually achieve these things because her billionaire donors would never allow it. And the progressives then would come to their senses and unify behind Bernie. And my answer was, if we only have the progressives uniting behind Bernie without the centrists, then we are stuck with Trump. There has to be some way to move the centrists. And that's Bernie or bust. That's leverage. Of course, the centrists, the elitists, are going to be upset about it, but the progressives won't elect a centrist, period. That's why the centrist think tank people, Third Way, John Cowan, and Center for American Progress, are getting behind Elizabeth Warren. Warren is the linchpin. DNC leaders and the centrist think tank leaders are in agreement with Wall Street. They don't really want Elizabeth, but she is perfectly positioned to divide the progressive voters who still align themselves with the suburban middle class more than with the needs of the oppressed, both here and abroad. She is progressive light. She is perfectly positioned, and she knows this. She knows in the same way she knew that when she didn't endorse Bernie last time and she ended up holding her arms aloft with the evil queen, she knew exactly what she was doing. She knows she's being used by the centrists against Bernie. She absolutely knows what she's doing. The centrist leaders, unlike their suburban cronies, actually are angling to re-elect Donald Trump. Elizabeth knows that too. They feel that they can live with him. Bernie, on the other hand, is an existential threat. They like him as much as the CIA liked JFK. Tinfoil hat. So I gave you the Graham Elwood video. He sees through Warren. He sees exactly what she's up to. This is the video. This is Graham Elwood.
You've been in politics for a little while. You've just recently reelected, and
That's
during
right.
that
One
time,
Senate term,
right? One Senate term, right? So, and during that time, you've done calls to wealthy donors. You've done big ticket fundraisers. You put together a pretty good war chest. I think about $11 million that you had amassed. What does that say about what you were doing before? If this is the right way to do it now, why now and why not before?
So look, I've never actually been in a deeply competitive primary.
I've never had to run under the scrutiny of the public eye where I actually had to stand for something. I was just always running as a senator where I could just say two-faced, double-talky things, and only the people of Massachusetts would swallow my bullshit. But now I got to try to swallow it across all of America, and people are paying more attention now that I want to be president. So I got to come up with some new ways to sling bullshit.
I get it. Republicans come to the table armed to the teeth. They've got all of their donors, their wealthy donors. They've got their super PACs. They've got their dark money. They got everything going for them. And I'm just going to be blunt. I do not believe in unilateral disarmament. We got to go into these fights, and we got to be willing to win these fights.
So this just applies to the primary. Like, were you to get the nomination, or anyone else to get the nomination, like, just raise all the money you can, however you can.
Yes, but here's what I want you to see that's different about it, Chris. Think about the difference once we're down to the two candidates. If the Democrats have spent the next year in a primary building this thing face-to-face, person-to-person, neighbor-to-neighbor across the country, think of the kind of foundation that we have laid down so that when we're really up against it in the general election, it's not just money to fund television ads. It's all the folks who'll do the door knocking. It's all the folks who'll make the phone calls. It's all the folks who'll reach out to their network, because you know how we're going to win in 2020? It's going to be big. It's going to be people who voted for Donald Trump last time around. It's going to be people who haven't voted at all.
What are you saying? What are you saying? What are you saying? You started the interview saying, we got to get the money out of politics. And now you're saying we'll have this infrastructure to get volunteers to knock on doors so it'll still be okay then to take big money out of politics, to get big money from politics? So you're in favor of, so you're just saying this in the primary to trick progressives or
there you go.
Not as informed, neoliberal, people who like, well, I liked Bernie, but I don't know, he was pie in the sky, whatever, those sort of not full-blown neoliberals, but just not paying as much of attention neoliberalese, to think that you're progressive, and then you're not. And that's like, we got to just do whatever we can to beat Trump. So you're going to take billionaire donors, because if you take billionaire donors, guess what? You're beholden to them. So then any of these progressive policies that you say that you for, this is all she does is this fucking double talky bullshit. Like green up the military. Oh man, yes. A green imperial army. That'll be so great. Rockets with, eco painted on the side. That's going to mean the world to the people in Yemen. They're just going to love that when Saudi Arabia bombs them with American weapons that have a leaf on them.
It's going to be people who see a vision and a way to make this democracy work, not just for the rich and the powerful, but make this democracy.
She just takes stuff Bernie Sanders said 3 years ago. And God,
work for everyone.
Final question on this, and I want to ask a few other questions about some stuff that is happening in the campaign, a proposal you put forward. But for this final question, I guess the question is, how much is this an either or, right? There are campaigns that are able to build both a sort of that kind of grassroots fundraising machinery and also wealthy donors and also do big ticket fundraising. What does it mean for a candidate's time? Why make this sort of decision?
Well, see, that's the real point. The best estimates are that most candidates for office are spending about 70% of their time with millionaires and billionaires, spending it behind closed doors at fancy cocktail receptions and private dinners in mansions. Let me tell you what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to do call time tonight. You know what call time is.
I do know what call time is.
This is when you call and say
It gives me a stomach ache, and I don't even have to do call time.
Well, I am doing call time tonight and tomorrow night and the next night, but here's the deal. The people I'm calling to say thank you to, I'm going to call not based on how much money they kicked in. I'm just going to pick these numbers up randomly, and I'm going to call people and say, thank you very much for being part of this. Thank you for going.
But you're still taking money from billionaires. She's so full of shit. This was back in February. Oh, this just dropped today. Elizabeth Warren's campaign turned to a big donor to pay for the DNC voter database despite her fundraising pledge. What is the DNC voter database? This is how the DNC runs their operation, if you're wondering how full of shit the Democratic Party is. The National Voter File is a pool of data about millions of people that presidential campaigns use as a foundation for their own private data as they identify and track support over time. It is managed by the DNC and cost campaigns $175,000. So you have to get this list, you have to pay $175,000. So she had a rich donor pay this. It's the equivalent, and her office says, well, no, we didn't take money from it. Well, she's not going against her word. Hey, we'd like this.
This isn't even the worst part. He's going to show in just a minute how she was talking against the big donors and the schmoozing and the canapé kinds of dinner parties where all these big money people are. But listen to what he's going to tell you about that in a minute.
This list, hey, rich guy, would you mind paying it? Sure.
It was a rich girl, actually.
Oh, he's not going to, 175 grand? 175 grand. Nah, that's not going to come with any strings attached. That's not going to come with any strings attached. She's great. She's the worst. She's such a double talker. It's unbelievable, but she says it all nice and folksy, and I'm from Oklahoma. It's just like, ugh. If you ever want to know what a female Joe Biden sounds like, there it is. As part of the agreement Warren signed with the DNC to access the voter file. So, of course, they're not going to just, it's 175 grand and an ounce of blood. And you got to sign a devil's deal.
More than an ounce.
She is slated to appear at major party fundraiser in San Francisco next month.
Aha.
So she's going to be in August up in San Francisco. But I'm sure it's a fundraiser for like 5, 10 regular people. Like she said, I'm going to call anybody, not just the big donors. Yeah, you're going to call a $10 donor, I'm sure, like 5 of them. But I bet you these folks are going to get phone calls, right? According to a copy of the invitation, donors will be able to pay $10,000 that she paid for a private cocktail dinner reception. $50,000 ticket gets you premium seating and a photo opportunity.
Ooh.
Boy, Liz, you're such a progressive.
Boy, Liz, you're such a progressive. But here's the thing. Both groups, potential Warren voters and corporate centrist suburban crony wannabes, are blinded by their own elitism and, let's just put it out there, class, sex, race bias. They're as bigoted as the Trump supporters and the other Republicans that they make fun of. They're every bit as bigoted. So even when presented with all the facts, they stubbornly cling to their Bernie reticence because he reeks of the grubbiness of true populism. There, I said it. I like that quote from the article. He reeks of the grubbiness of true populism, and the wannabe cronies of the corporatists. They can't stomach him. This is class warfare, pure and simple. That's why there's so much snarling from the elitists. They can't just scoff and sneer any longer because Bernie is becoming a true threat. Check out the blue donor map. New York Times, you've got Sanders in first place, Warren, and then Buttigieg, Harris, Biden, and O'Rourke. And this is Bernie's map. It's blue. It's all Bernie blue. 746,000 individual donors. To even understand where the other money is, they had to take Bernie off. They had to do a map that took Bernie off so you can see where the other fundraising is with individual donors. But I have to say, in the analyses of this map that I've heard other leftist commentators say, they haven't talked about how grubby this map is. Individual donors, these are not the people who go to the canapé kinds of hors d'oeuvre dinner parties, $50,000 for a photo opportunity. This map doesn't show them. They're not anywhere on this map, probably. Well, in little spots here and there, but these are regular people. These are working class people. And so, yes, we can show how the working class people understand they're behind Bernie, but we can't win. We can't get Bernie in without the centrists. Their hatred, the centrists, their hatred for Donald Trump is our only hope. Nothing else can possibly move them. My biggest fear is that they will bang on their gilded high chairs until it's too late. That's what they are saying they will do. They say that they will vote for their favored candidates in the primaries and then switch to Bernie only when absolutely necessary in the general election. And this is what they must be dragged, kicking and screaming to understand. By then, it will be too late. The superdelegates will deny Bernie in the second round of the convention, and Donald Trump will win again. They are in blatant denial. But they must accept the facts and do the math. The only possibility of avoiding Trump is to vote for Bernie in the primaries.